Welcome to Ayurvedic Minute. Today, let's talk long-term sinus solutions. Thank you for joining me for another Ayurvedic Minute. In a follow-up to my hugely successful video on sinus points for drainage of sinus congestion, which now has over 3 million views, I wanted to go into other solutions over the long term that can help you if this is something that's really been plaguing you, either for a long part of your life, or maybe you've just had it ongoing for several weeks. The reason that video seems to be so successful is because this is something that happens to so many people, either over a long period or for a very important period in their life when they're trying to sleep or they're trying to work, and it's really affecting their daily life. So let's look at some other options that can help you when this is something that keeps happening to you over and over again. First, what's the problem? Why is this happening to you? There are so many possible sources of irritation to your sinuses. It could be pollen, it could be pollution, it could be indoor air quality, it can be climatic changes, it can be what you're eating, it could be medications that you're taking. You know, there's so many possible origins of the problem besides even being a bacterial, viral, or even fungal infection. And I know when I look at the way that conventional medicine has intervened in sinus issues over the last couple decades, really, they really used to treat everything with an antibiotic, as we all are maybe aware of, and that doesn't fix a virus, doesn't fix most fungal infections either. In fact, it can cause fungal infections. But additionally, what we've started to see is that a lot of people have ongoing fungal infections that might have started as a bacterial infection, but antibiotics killed off all the bacteria and the fungus have started to survive. So what happens on an Ayurvedic perspective, because this is the Ayurvedic Minute, is that you might have too much kapha or too much vata, or a combination of the two at different times. So kapha, if you want a little bit more information about that, refer back to my video on the doshas and what kapha is all about. But when kapha is out of balance and it affects your sinuses, this is where you're producing so much mucus. Kapha is a fluid-rich dosha. It's very moist. It's also very cool. And so that moisture tends to get solidified and coagulated and doesn't flow that well when things are out of balance. What makes a kapha produce more mucus? Well, those things that throw kapha out of balance. So too much dairy. Sorry to say it, it's probably the thing you crave the most. So mostly pasteurized, homogenized, conventional dairy, and then cheeses that are made from that poor quality milk. Not so much butter, not so much ghee, not so much the harder cheeses that you might get, like, you know, from an Italian store, or French cheeses, something like that. They're not as bad, but for a while you might need to even cut them out. And then refined foods, refined sugars, refined flours, refined other grains. Those really aggravate kapha. Even too much salt. A little salt can be helpful for kapha, but too much starts to create too much moisture if you're consuming it all the time, and you have to expel that somewhere. And then the other thing is your environment. Being around too much mold or too much dampness in general, and so certain times of year are worse for that, really affects somebody who already has some kapha in their constitution. Now let's say either because of your lifestyle or your environment or even your constitution and the way that it's a combination, you add some vata to that. Vata is movement, and it's dry and it's cool. And so if you get cold, dry air onto moisture, it starts to solidify. And so for those of you that might try acupressure points or, you know, breathing exercises and don't get anywhere with that congestion, you have headache, you have pain when you bend over, it's drying up. And even sinus medications, those ones that are supposed to decongest you, they're very drying. And so sometimes you just can't get that mucus out of your sinuses. But things that aggravate vata are dry foods, crunchy foods, pretzels, chips, popcorn, and that's the exact thing that a vata craves because it makes a vata feel more vata. Moving around too much, being too busy, flying. So this is something I have to watch out because I travel a lot on airplanes. So being in that dry airplane air, first of all, breathing all the pollutants, second of all, and third, just flying in general is exactly what aggravates Vata, because it is Vata. You're in the air and you're moving and it's dry and it's cold. And so that makes it even worse. So you may notice if you have some sinus congestion and you go on an airplane, whoa, it just makes it so much worse. So Vata needs to have moisturizing foods, soups, that kind of thing to get things going. And even if you're more of a Kapha person, having some of those warming foods may actually start to get things moving. So what are 5 ways or 5 methods over the long term that you can care for your sinuses and kind of up your game with these sort of regimens when you really need it most? Well, the first thing that a lot of people need to do, whether it's because of Vata or Kapha imbalance, is a steam. And there's a safe way to do a steam. I don't want you just to run out there and start boiling water and stick your face in it. We want to make sure that nobody gets hurt. You don't want to do it over the stove. Let me just give you that in case you're impatient and want to jump out and do it. But having a pot of boiled water that's letting off steam that you can add a few drops of essential oils to is the way to get that mucus moving, and that warmth will get it loosened up, even if it's Kapha or Vata. But there are specific essential oils that might be better for each. So Kapha can really benefit from things like eucalyptus and rosemary. They have some drying components to them, and they're stimulating and energizing, and the Kapha really needs that. A little bit of peppermint might also be beneficial for Kapha. It's not really proven whether peppermint truly opens your sinuses, but it makes you feel like they're more open. I don't really know the difference between it, but I keep finding research that says that. Tea tree oil is a good addition if you do think you actually have a sinus infection, because it can help to rebalance the flora in your sinuses, especially if it might be an ongoing fungal infection. Tea tree can be great, but I would only add 1 drop. And when you do steam, make sure your eyes are closed, because otherwise they will really hurt when those volatile oils start to rise up with the steam. For Vata, the rosemary can actually be really beneficial for Vata as well. Ginger is a great herb, period, for Vata. It's warming, it's lubricating, it's really good to carry things through the body in a Vata. And ginger essential oil is no different. When you put it in a steam, that's a great one for Vata. So dry coughs, but with congestion, for example, that's a great solution. Hyssop, which I don't have here today, that's HYSSOP, is more expensive, harder to find, but it's beautiful as an essential oil for Vata type congestion or even a dry cough. And so steam can really soothe a dry cough, it can soothe irritation to the throat, and it can help get all that mucus moving. And so once you've steamed and you've loosened that up and you've warmed up the constitution, a second great solution is what's called Nasiha Oil. And this could be as simple as you clarify some butter and make ghee and put it in a dropper and warm it up and drop it into your nose, which means that you have to really, really tip your head far back. It's good to get somebody to help you so that there's a direct line from your nostril up through the nasal passages, and you'll feel some of that come down the back of your throat. So don't be alarmed. Anything that has to do with putting stuff in your nose, you have to have a little bit of self-control and realize it might tickle, it might itch a little bit, it might make you want to cough or scratch or blow your nose. You have to kind of breathe deeply, relax a little bit, and let it work in your nostrils. So getting someone to help you. What's great about Nasiha oil as it is made in Ayurvedic medicine, it's a base of typically sesame oil, and then it may have some different herbs in it that can be soothing. Some are more directed toward the sinuses, some are more directed toward actually, soothing the central nervous system via the brain. So these are great to look for. This one I have here is actually by Banyan, but there are several great companies that do that. A neti pot has always been a good solution, especially if you're constantly having contamination with pollution or pollen that may be causing the irritation that's causing you to create mucus to try to wash it out. Neti pots are available in beautiful porcelain and ceramic versions. but they break. I've had that experience a lot. So it's nice to get a good recycled plastic. This is made of post-consumer recycled plastic. It's not going to break. It's not toxic either. It doesn't have toxic chemicals in it. And so you have to just be very careful when you use neti pots about the temperature of the water. In a neti pot, what you do is make a mixture typically of a salt blend, and this again is the Himalayan Chandra, where they've created a pharmaceutical grade salt with no contaminants so that you can make a salt wash to wash those things out of your nose. Why don't you want to use just plain water? It's not the right pH, it's not the right salinity, it will hurt, it will feel odd. Even like when you're in the ocean and you get a nose full of water, it's too saline compared to your nose. Once in a while, if you're really congested, a neti pot, which you have to use by tipping your head over the sink and you have to kind of turn this way, sometimes that fluid gets backed up against the ear and then you have ear pain. This has been my experience when you're really, really congested. Sometimes I prefer to use the squeezy neti, which is this wonderful NeilMed system, which allows you, when you fill up to the line with the exact same blend, to stay upright over the sink and just be clearing out your sinus passages, and it just runs out the other side of the nose a little bit, maybe down the back of the throat. So NeilMed is pretty ingenious with giving you something that is helps to avoid getting it backed up into your ears. But if that's always a problem, if it always gets backed up into your ears, then a neti pot is not really the best solution for you. This is something that you can actually add to the neti pot, and it's kind of a booster. You have some, I think, grapefruit seed extract, some essential oils in an appropriate amount, a few Chinese herbs in here that are going to help to restore balance to the microbiome of your nasal passages. And so that gets added into the salt after you've already prepared it. If you're on the go, you don't have time to make a neti pot, to make a nose rinse, you need something with you while you work, while you travel, these are great solutions, these sinus sprays. And I actually prefer these to the squeezy bottles like you'll see here because they're a pump. And you're able to kind of put your fingers on it like this and then pump it, and it goes right up your nose. And if you can time it, you inhale at the same time. And this soothes the sinuses. All of these are kind of better for vata, because that salt and that soothing of the sinuses, you remove that irritation that causes you to create mucus and that dryness that causes it to solidify. If you're a kapha and you have kapha type congestion, this is helpful, but a neti pot may not work for you because of the way you may push that congestion further against your ears. The clear sinus packets are also great. This is again really helpful if you have a lot of constant irritation and during allergy season. They make little packets instead of just being salt. This also has the xylitol in it, which is antibacterial and helps to restore good balance to the microbiome of the nose, which you do have a microbiome in your nose, and that can go in a neti pot or into a NeilMed squeezy bottle. Or again, if you just find that you constantly have sinus irritation, you can take it with you on the go. And these you just kind of have to squeeze at the same time that you inhale and get this moisture and lubrication in your nose to reduce the irritation, which will reduce the mucus production, which will reduce the further congestion that leads to that pain and aggravation. So those are all different applications that you can use once you've steamed and loosened things up, or that you might want to use like during the day when you're out and about. Now, again, look at my video that has been around for several years on acupressure points that you can use to release some of that mucus and get it flowing and release the sinus pain. Again, there are a few people for whom that doesn't work because they're too congested, and it's important to do the steam first, then do the acupressure points. Pranayama, which is breathing exercises in Ayurvedic medicine, can also be very beneficial. I have another video on alternate nostril breathing that can be helpful. But if you're congested and you can't breathe at all through your nose, there's a great exercise that can be done to get those sinuses moving, and that will be demonstrated here.
Wolfie, somebody told me that your nose is all congested and you can't breathe through your nose. Is that right?
Well, I learned something in yoga that's great for you. You want to try it? All right. Hold your hands out in front of you, your paws, excuse me. Tuck your thumb claw in. Close your fingers over it. Now run in place, bringing your knees all the way up to your chest, as high as you can. Do that for 15 to 30 seconds. And then when you pause, and you open your paws, can you breathe through your nose now? Oh, Wolfie, I'm so glad. The fourth thing that can be super beneficial for long-term ongoing sinus conditions, for people with asthma, for allergies, for irritation with pollutants, and other general cardiovascular and cardiopulmonary concerns is Hallowe Therapy. And across the country and all over the world now, actually it started across the world, are salt spas that provide this sort of Hallowe Therapy. Salt spas started actually in, I believe it was Eastern Europe and perhaps even Poland or Czech Republic, where the old salt mines, they found that when people worked in those salt mines, they didn't have all of the tuberculosis, the congestion, the cardiopulmonary conditions that the general population had and were really susceptible to. You know, if you're living indoors and you have a coal or wood stove, you're inhaling these pollutants all the time, and people would get pretty sick and it could kill them. But those that worked in the salt mines, ironically, didn't have those problems. They had a hard life, but they didn't have those problems. And so what they started to do was these abandoned salt mines, they started to bring people in and have them sleep overnight in there on cots. And just the ambient amount of salt in the air from it evaporating off the salt, off the walls, helped their lung and cardiopulmonary conditions. So very interesting. So now all over the world, there are actual chambers that are created that are lined in salt, that have maybe Himalayan salt blocks, or they spray a regular white salt onto the walls, and you go in there and relax. They've got salt crystals on the floor, and there's a Hallowe generator or a Hallowe Therapy machine outside of the room that pipes this micronized salt into the air that you are breathing. So this is beneficial not only for your lungs, but also for your skin. And it's beneficial in many really interesting ways. You're really only looking for the sodium chloride, but Himalayan salt and maybe salt from Utah or from the salt lakes and rivers in Australia, there's salt sources all over the world. It does not have to be Himalayan salt, but those sources will be more rich in certain minerals. It's a bit like bathing in salt water when you expose as much of your skin to it as possible. In fact, even eczema and psoriasis are said to get better in exposure to Hallowe Therapy when you immerse your whole body in that room. I don't think you get to go in there naked, but you know, just having a short sleeve shirt and getting any areas of your skin that might be irritated exposed while also breathing it in are really important. So it's touted to be antibacterial, antiviral, and antifungal. It's touted to be anti-inflammatory, and by in the respect that it reduces IgEs in the body, which initiate an overactive immune response. Additionally, it enhances mucociliary transport. What that means is that these little tiny hairs all throughout your lungs and your bronchioles, they're just teeny tiny microscopic hairs that move mucus out. And they're even up in your sinus passages. And chloride, interestingly enough, is the element that is making those cells and those little cilia hairs function. And so this is the problem for people with cystic fibrosis, is they don't have this chlorine transport system. So increasing the chloride availability helps to upregulate the transport of mucus out of your lungs and nasal passages. Additionally, that enhanced mucociliary transport moves not only mucus out of your lungs and nasal passages, but pollutants like pollen and outdoor pollutants and particulate matter like we get in New York City here. So when you have the ability to go into a salt spa and experience the relaxation and the immersion of a salt spa, I think it's the best long-term option, but it comes with a cost, both dollars and time. So There's another solution that some people might take advantage of, and it varies as to the effectiveness, but you can actually buy these special porcelain, I've seen them plastic too, but I prefer the porcelain vessels that you put the salt crystals in. They're coarse salt crystals, and every time you insert the pipe into your nose and you inhale, it pulls that salt out of the crystals and up into your nasal passages, and that's pictured here. But I think this is a good short-term solution when you don't have access to a salt spa. But if you have ongoing respiratory conditions and concerns, finding a local salt spa, buying a subscription, try Groupons to get a chance to try it out for less expensive, work out ways that you can get yourself or your family in there, and it's giving your body a chance to relax and to avoid all of the pollutants that have been aggravating your sinuses in the first place. Thank you so much for listening today. I hope that these 5 long-term solutions to your sinus problems have helped you. Don't forget to like the video and subscribe and turn on your notifications for more content. Until we meet again, live long, live strong, and make a difference.